Hello everyone. My apologies for not being able to deliver the lecture properly last time through the Skype because we had network issues and some of our students could not hear me or could not understand me when I was conducting that lecture series via Skype. And as I promised, I am recording this lecture once again in order for the benefit of everyone. And in series of lectures, I am the first instructor to deliver this lecture on good faith and the performance of the contracts. And I'll be dealing with basically related to Bhutanese laws and good faith in Bhutan. So in this lecture, we are going to have the following topics. We are going to discuss about what is meant by good faith and its relation with law of contract. Then I'll be discussing good faith in Bhutanese contract laws with special reference on performance of contracts, since your paper will be involved in this. And I'll wrap up the lecture at the end. And then we have the question and answer sessions, which you will send me the questions in writing and I will respond it in writing in your emails. In fact, at the end of the uh, getting all the questions, I will compile all the questions and I will in fact send the answers in one document compiled from all other schools and then to all the students. Now let's discuss about understanding the good faith in its relationship with the law of contract. I think law of contract is basically it means we are entering into some kind of transactions. And a contract is generally in the modern form is more of a written agreement between different parties where we agree to certain obligations, certain duties, as well as certain rights. And good faith is one of the most important elements in any kind of contract. Essentially, good faith is one of the most important aspects in any kind of transactions across the world. Doesn't matter where we are. So, which means that it crosses geographical boundaries. It crosses societal different societies. It is important for everyone uh, as a human being to have good faith when we enter into any kind of contract. In short, good faith may be defined as a trust or honesty while entering into an agreement or contract. So basically, it means that we should be able to trust the other party when we enter into contract, and then that, which also means that if we enter into any contract, the other party must trust us, and we must act honestly. We must enter into contract with true full disclosure of the information that we have, and then we must not hide things purposely, deliberately, or we must not fraud, we must not cheat, we must not be dishonest in disclosing about the contract that we are entering into. For example, if we are selling a car, let's say a second-hand car, and car has defects, and then if we do not disclose what defects the car had, and then if we tell the buyer and tell them that this car has no defect, it is perfectly fine, and then one day he finds out that the defect existed way before and then the other party did not disclose, then it would amount that we actually entered into contract in bad faith, not in good faith, which also means that the trust is lost, we have been dishonest. So that is basically essentially what a good faith means. The entire principle of good faith is based on honesty and fair play. So when we enter into any kind of transactions, we must be honest enough, we must be fair, we must not take advantage of the other person, we must exercise due diligence while transacting any form of business or any kind entering into any kind of contracts or any kind of agreements, whether it is written or it is not unwritten. So it doesn't matter so long as we are honest enough, and then we play a fair and we do not take the advantage of the other person, knowing that he will not know this one, and then I will take the advantage and I will make more profits. I will be at the advantage. I think these are some of the important aspects that we must understand when we study about good faith. So basically means that we are doing something in good, for the other people. We are trying to be, you know, more honest so that the other person doesn't unnecessarily, suffer from the transactions that person had with us or any parties. In fact, it is opposite to bad faith. Bad faith means we generally fraud. In Bhutan, it's well known. A fraud is a well known, and we also now these days we can see a lot of scams, either through internet or through other means that people try to benefit out of some others' loss. This, so therefore, good faith is also opposite to bad faith. And bad faith may be defined as conducting dishonesty in performing a contract. So, in terms of performance of the contract, it's basically that when you perform, you know you can do it, but you still don't do it because you don't want to, because you act dishonesty and you make excuses, and then that is a bad faith. Good faith may be in formation or in performance, or it all can also be enforcement of contracts. So it depends on what kind of situations you are. And one of the most important aspects of good faith is in the performance of contracts, because once you are once you enter into a contract, and then if you do not perform, even though if you can, even though if you know that you can do it, but if you just because you want to cause harassment to the other person, you want to cause uh, you know some form of injury to the other person, or you want to make sure, for example, you are like constructing a road, and then as a contractor, if you do not perform that, although you know that the contract could be completed in short period of time, but just to make advantage, to take advantage of the other party and get more money, you make some excuses dishonestly and say that the weather is not good, there is more risk, although you know there is no risk. All these kinds can be, are kind of a bad faith that the person has. So therefore, good faith is important in all forms of contracts, formation, performance, or in terms of enforcement. Just to give you an example of simple examples of what good faith could be, disclosing material facts of goods and services they provide to consumers. So, for example, if you buy an electrical appliance and then you know that there is some defect or there is some risk associated with that electrical appliance, and then you do not tell the consumer, the buyer, that it does have this kind of defects or this kind of uh, problems, and then later on that suffer person has electric shock and the person dies. Basically you have entered into the contract with the bad faith. You have not disclosed the material facts of that goods. For services, you know that the services that you're going to be provided or that you promise is not going to be delivered. In fact, at the end, you know that there are certain problems that you have and you won't be able to do that. Still, no, you tell the consumers that I will do it and I can do it, and then you do not disclose why you can't do it and then what are the problems within that services. That would also be an example. And also refraining from abusing the ability to bargain. Like if you look at today in terms of buying things, I think in the western part, entire the market is governed by big giant corporate sectors, and then they can take advantage of us and they can advertise and say that these are the great things, these are great, all kinds of advertisements they could make. And also, even between the individuals, when the other one has a higher post in terms of, if you look into the public services, then some people are at high post and some are at lower post, and then they can use that abuse that authority. Or they also know that the other person is ignorant of that. For example, farmers and the professionals dealing with agricultural products, they would use that ability of the higher intellectual, you know, uh, things that they know about agriculture, and then they bargain at such a low price from the farmers because they take the advantage in during the bargaining time. So these are some of the examples that you could also look at. And the other one is that acting in due diligence, and basically that is very, very important in terms of being, trying your best, trying honestly, and then, you know, if you do perform your parts so honestly, then it would never amount to bad faith. Amount to bad faith. In fact, if you act in good faith, you always have advantage over the when you are into a real problem. Now, as an example of bad faith, for example, a seller concealing defect in his product to the buyer, as I just told you about the electrical and appliances that one would buy. If you look at the builders willfully failing to perform his duty, which could be performed, which I also discussed earlier, and then uh, knowingly not acting with due diligence. So basically, you are not exercising the due diligence. Why good faith is important in contract laws? It helps to honor the contracts. In fact, it helps to honor the contracts in the sense that people will be happy to enter into contracts with you because they know that you are an honest person, you are a trustworthy person, you will not fraud. And then if you fraud once or twice, if you become dishonest, then people will not honor your contracts because they think that, oh, that party is not trustworthy. I think we should not enter into that contract. And it also helps to maintain trust and honesty between contracting parties. Basically, good when you have the element of good faith, because generally parties enter into contract in good faith. Generally, the parties think that this contract is going to be good and everything has been discussed properly, and we can trust that person. So basically, to maintain trust and honesty between contracting parties, good faith is very important and it also encourages due diligence. In fact, it helps the people. Okay, I should act in exercise due diligence because otherwise I'll be in a problem when the so it encourages due diligence, and of course it also prevents all forms of fraud. It uh, prevents forms of uh, things that could be taken advantageously by some other person in any kind of transactions. So therefore, it also helps to prevent frauding. It also prevents from cheating. It also prevents from lying. So all things can be prevented when there is a good faith. Now, since we are going to talk about brief about Bhutan, so I thought that we could briefly discuss about where is Bhutan because we are a very small nation. So I'll just briefly discuss without much explanation because these are self-explanatory. Bhutan is a small nation measuring less than 37,000 square kilometer, and it is located between India and China. Oh, sorry, actually, Bhutan is a small nation measuring there is a brief description, the introduction on Bhutan, and Bhutan is a small nation measuring. I actually made a mistake. It's just over 38,000 square kilometers, not 37,000 square kilometers. It is located between India and China. In India, Bhutan is surrounded by Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, West Bengal, and Sikkim. And in China, we are surrounded by the Tibetan region of China in the north. It has a population just over 800,000 people, and it has a democratic constitutional monarchy. So, king is the head of the state, and prime minister, who is elected by the people through a direct election, and is the head of the government. And Bhutan is mainly a Buddhist nation, although we do have Hindu and other religions as well. And it is often considered to be one of the happiest countries not only in Asia but in the world. A few facts of Bhutan. Bhutan has a fundamental principle of development in Bhutan is known as gross national happiness. The entire developmental paradigm is, based on this gross national happiness. So anything that you do must attain the happiness of the people. Education in Bhutan is completely free and also provides free health services. And it stands the second in terms of GDP per capita in South Asia with $3,438. So we are just next to Maldives in Southeast Asia, and Bhutan has 60% forest coverage at all times. It's a constitutional requirement. It's a constitutional mandate that Bhutan must maintain 60% forest coverage at all times. And Bhutan is also one of the only country which is carbon negative. And main source of revenue, we have hydropower, which is completely a free and clean energy and agriculture products. And Bhutan's legal system. Bhutan's, as I told you during the class last time, that Bhutan's legal system is very modern, very recent. In fact, the modern legal system of Bhutan started in early 1960s. So we are just over, 100 years. In fact, less than 100 years in terms of legal system, the modern legal system. Bhutanese courts are divided into four types. We have subdivisional, district, high court, and supreme court. And high court and supreme court are also constitutional courts. They are also called as the appellate courts. And there is no mandatory requirement of lawyers for any litigation. That means in Bhutan, you do not require a lawyer to go to the court for any kind of litigation. It is up to the parties to decide whether to represent by themselves. They can represent their family members, or of course, they can also hire lawyers. By the order of the Supreme Court in Bhutan, all litigations, all criminal prosecutions must not take more than 1 year to adjudicate the cases and pronounce judgments, except under special circumstances. That could be like the parties unable to come to the court on time. So in fact, at the end of the year, the judges are required to explain why some cases went more than 1 year in resolving this for any of the courts. So therefore, in fact, Bhutanese courts have, I think, one of the fastest in terms of making decisions and then resolving issues. And Bhutan neither follows common law tradition nor civil law tradition, rather is composed of both traditional additional unique features of Bhutanese legal system, as well as we do have a lot of influence from common law traditions. For example, Bhutan has more of a common law system if you look at in terms of litigation in the courts, because generally judges are like a referee where the parties argue and they are decentralized kind of a litigation. Whereas if you there is also element of civil law traditions, because the courts in some instances do investigations, do so-called judicial investigations. So and also courts heavily rely on the written laws, so which means we are more of a civil law tradition. So therefore, it is quite a unique kind of a legal system here. And then here, in terms of court fees, unlike most of the countries, Bhutan pays less than $1 in terms of litigation fees in the court. Generally, we call it nil 50, which is equivalent to Indian currency, which is 50. So because Bhutan's currency is pegged with Indian currency as equivalent. And then if you go to the High Court or Supreme Court for appeal, then you will have to pay around $600 as a fee, which will be forfeited if you lose the case, but if it is given back if you actually win the case. So if you appeal the case and if you win the case, you actually get back that 600 US dollars. But if you lose, then that 600 dollars would be forfeited by the courts. Basically, this is to discourage people for unnecessarily, come to higher court for appeals for appealing, because in Bhutan it is very easy to appeal. You do not have any special grounds to appeal, so therefore anybody can in fact go and then go to the higher court and appeal. Now, coming to the major main parts, the good faith in Bhutanese contract laws. Bhutan's development philosophy is based on gross national happiness, which I discussed earlier. And one of the important aspects of this philosophy is the peaceful coexistence and harmony. So, the developmental philosophy is that at the end of the day, even the development, litigation, anything that we do in Bhutan must attend and help to restore a peace and harmony in the society, peace and harmony to the individual people. Therefore, good faith is an essential component of helping to attain this one. And in Bhutan, so many things happen on the basis of trust and honesty between different people, and then therefore it is important that good faith plays a major role in Bhutanese society in terms of, if we look at societal norms, in terms of things that is happening in Bhutan. And trust and honesty plays a significant role, and then in fact in Bhutan, if you are not trustworthy, your character will be known by other people. You will lose the social status as a good person. and hence people try to be, always demonstrate that they are good people, they are honest people, they are loyal people, and which means that it encourages people to act in good faith. As I just said, the Bhutan's society is built on two important paradigms. One is Bhutan is a Buddhist nation, and there is a concept called Thadamsi and Lejumde in Buddhist concept, which is also a customary law in Bhutan, in the sense that we believe in that. Basically, it is a karmic circle, and according to this principle, everything we do will come back to us one time before we die, or at least as soon as we die, that will come back. That means that if we try to cheat, if we try to fraud anybody, if we try to be dishonest to anybody, it will come back to us one day. And we strongly believe in that, and most people believe in that, and in fact, even the modern people. And therefore, it really discourages people from being dishonest. It really discourages people from, frauding or cheating or, trying to not to disclose things because they think that if I hide today, and then if it will come to me because one day the circle of karmic will repeat and I will get affected. And also we have a lot of parents who are elders who will say that don't do, the, don't be dishonest, don't be, don't fraud people because one day it will come back. It is not good for our karma. So I think it plays a major role in terms of maintaining good faith in Bhutan. The other is societal norms and relationships. Trust and future opportunities play a vital role in Bhutan as a close-knit society because if you are found to be untrustworthy, if you are found to be dishonest person, your future opportunities will always be affected in Bhutan because it is often described in Bhutan that everyone knows everyone, which means that we are such a small nation that somehow we are related to each other, somehow we know each other, and then that is where someone's personality would be shared with other people and say that this person is dishonest, this person is you know he is found to be always in taking advantage of other people, he's not a good person. And in fact his family status will be affected, his children status will be affected. When they go to school they will say that, oh, she is a son, she is a daughter, he is a son of a bad guy who is very dishonest. We have seen in newspaper that he has been found in, cases of fraud, and then so in a way this plays a very very vital role in terms of enforcing and then making sure that the good faith is always there, particularly in terms of performance of the contract. If we commit fraud and bad faith, we may escape one time, but after a few times, our actions will be known by others, and we may be termed as a liars, dishonest by the society, and then the community would know, and then if in the offices people will know that nobody will. If in fact, if you want to, example, if you want to borrow money, nobody will give you money because they will think that you will not give back. You are dishonest person, you are untrustworthy, and they will say and pretend that, oh, we don't have money, sorry, uh, if I have I'll give you, but I don't have, but nobody will give you money. So this is a simple example how things can happen in Bhutan. In Bhutan, main laws that are concerning good faith is that one is the Contract Act of Bhutan 2013, as I discussed last time. Contract Act of Bhutan 2013, so very very recent compared to contract laws of I think most of the countries, and more so with those law schools who are taking part in this program. For example, in India, the Contract Act was enacted as early as 1872, whereas Bhutan's the Contract Act was enacted in 2013, and we also have a Sales of Commercial Goods Act of Bhutan, and we have Public Procurement Rules and Regulation. This is a revised 2014. This is basically it concerns about the public contracts and Consumer Protection Act of Bhutan 2011, and we also have Consumer Protection Rules and Regulations. So these are the major laws that dictates contracts in Bhutan, and now, in terms of Contract Act of Bhutan, there is no general requirement of good faith either in performance, formation, or even in enforcement of contracts in Bhutan. If you look at United States restatement, I think good faith is a general imposition of kind of a clause, which is a general clause which applies to every contract in the United States, whereas in Bhutan it doesn't require, and I think it is true for Indian Contract Act as well. The good faith requirement is specific to only certain elements in the Contract Act and not in all aspects of contracts in Bhutan. And if you look at the section 143 on the pledge, the pawner and pawnee, then it is required that good faith must be, practiced. And in law of agency, principal agent, there does require that good faith must be uh, practiced, but not in other. Only in these two contracts and contracts of Bhutan 2013 doesn't require that good faith as a part of contract in all essential, all kinds of contract, which also means it limits the powers of court in applying and recognizing the good faith as a general imposition, general requirement of contract in Bhutan, because there is no legal basis for the courts to, in fact, invoke and say that good faith must be a component of every contract. And I think that is one of the gaps in Bhutan's Contract Act, which I recommended, in fact, in my thesis paper, that Bhutan's Contract Act must be amended to incorporate good faith as a general provision so that all kinds of contracts in Bhutan can be governed under the principle of good faith. And yeah, so in fact, Bhutan's contract law resembles very much with the Indian Contract Act of India in many ways. In fact, if you look at the chapters, most of the things resemble Indian Contract Act. So more or less, if you look at in terms of good faith in Indian Contract Act and Bhutan's Contract Act, it's more or less very, very similar. I am not very sure about the Contract Act of France or Uganda, but here in Bhutan in India, I tend to know that these two countries share are very similar in terms of application of good faith through the Contract Acts. Now, Bhutan also has a Sale of Commercial Goods Act of Bhutan 2000, and there it says that every contract or duty within this act imposes an obligation of good faith in its performance and enforcement. So, in terms of sale of commercial goods, then yes, in Bhutan it is a general obligation, and there is a general clause that imposes obligation of good faith in performance and enforcement. But the scope of that law is very limited. In fact, it applies only to the transaction in goods. It does not apply to other types of transactions, such as transactions in services, securities, immovable property. So, which means that the scope of this law is very, very limited. No, it doesn't go beyond the transactions of goods. So, which means the scope is very limited, and which also makes that the good faith is not well recognized, legally recognized in Bhutan. And there is no definition of good faith in Contract Act of Bhutan, but in terms of Sale of Commercial Goods Act of Bhutan, it defines good faith as honesty in fact and observance of reasonable standards of fair dealing. So it requires that two. One is that honesty in disclosing the material facts of any goods, that is sold, and then observant of reasonable standards of fair dealing. You should not take advantage of the other person, the consumers, the goods, people who deals in goods must be fair enough in dealing with this kind of standards. And in case of merchant, it also requires reasonable standards of fair dealing in trade. So in trade also, it is required that good faith must be there. In fact, there is a Bhutanese ingrained belief that in trade, if you do not be fair enough, like for example, in weighing machine, if you have problems, it is considered that you will accumulate demerits and you will go to the hell in when you die. So therefore, these are important aspects in Bhutanese beliefs, but it is still not recognized in most of the contract laws in Bhutan. And then we have no clause in terms of good faith in public procurement rules and regulation, and then Consumer Protection Act. So both the Consumer Protection Act and public procurement rules, there is no mention of good faith. But by looking at there is a customary law, which is the laws related to public, uh, pronounced by one of the great saints in Bhutan. On that code of conduct, it actually requires that the consumers must not be, fraud. And in fact, the people who sell, who deal in this kind of consumer related things, they must be honest in all kinds of consumer related things. It could be vegetable markets, it could be big shopping complexes, it could be any kind of transactions that you do with your customer. We are required to observe fair and reasonable standards. So that is required, but unfortunately, it has not been incorporated in the Consumer Protection Act of Bhutan in 2011, which means that it is still not legally recognized in Bhutanese laws. And in summary, so we have studied about good faith, and basically, good faith means conducting any transactions, including performance of contractual obligations, honestly and fairly. So basically, it means that we must be, able to uh, exercise all means to disclose the things when we enter into transactions, disclose the information, the material facts of anything that is being transacted. When we enter into agreements, we must make sure that whatever we know, we tell the other party, and other party must tell us too. So basically, we are disclosing everything honestly and then trying to do in good faith. So that is a good faith, in fact. And then also when we deal, we should not take advantage of other people. We should not, take advantage in bargaining because we know more than the other person, and taking that advantage, it will be very unfair on our part. And good faith is an abstract concept, yet its role is of paramount importance in any kind of contractual obligations, whether in terms of formation, performance, or enforcement. So it is abstract, but you can actually see, because you can actually prove that somebody has entered into contract in bad faith. That person has not performed the contract, although he could perform that one. He made excuses. He made, he lied, and then he cheated on us. That can be in fact sin. So therefore, good faith is abstract concept, but not necessary in when you actually look at the conducts will let us know whether the person has entered into contract or his performance is in good faith or bad faith. And in fact, in Bhutan, good faith dictates the societal norms in relationships in all aspects, including contracts. And one of the defects in Bhutanese law still is it still does not explicitly require that good faith in performance and enforcement of all general contracts, except in business transactions related to goods and not even services. In fact, only the goods in Commercial Sales of Goods Act, and therefore good faith in terms of legally binding clauses in Bhutan is yet to be seen. It is very limited, but as a society, the good faith plays a major role in Bhutan. And then, thank you very much. So this is the end of the lecture. And if you have any doubts, please send me your questions to the email here, and I will compile all the questions, and then I'll respond at a time to all the questions in one file and send it to everyone in this group so that you all get the questions asked by other law schools. In fact, I'll mention which law school asked what kind of questions, and then I'll send with my answers so that all of you will get to see the questions as well as the answers. And then of course, if you have follow-up questions, you could still send me. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be the first instructor to conduct this class. My apologies for any shortcomings that has happened in this class, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. If you have any queries, I'll be very happy to do that. And my best wishes to everyone who are participating in this. And my uh, assistant will always be there. So please kindly let me know if you have any queries or if you have any disagreements on what I have talked, any clarifications that you need. And thank you very much, and have a nice day, have a nice evening to everybody. Thank you very much.